Did you ever sneak out when you were a teenager?
Well, you see, the last time I snuck out, I guess I was technically a teenager, but I was in middle school. The last time I snuck out of my house, I was 13, and I went into these woods over by the elementary school where I lived, and we met some meth heads in the woods. And then whenever I went home and my mom found out where I'd been, I was grounded for like 2 months.
Casey.
She handed me my ass.
That's how people get killed. And since they were never heard from again, just rings in my head.
But I didn't die, though. The thing is, they were very nice meth heads.
Only in Missouri would there be exceptionally nice meth heads.
It's that good old Midwestern charm, you know?
It's that good old Midwestern charm.
Welcome to This Is Lit, a podcast where we drink and talk about our favorite books. I'm Elizabeth.
And I'm Casey.
So raise a glass and let's get started.
Okay, Liz, what are you drinking today?
I am drinking an old-fashioned made with bourbon because I could not find any good Southern drinks where I already owned all the ingredients. Because apparently I'm a Yankee.
Well, that's not a bad thing to be.
No.
As far as Manhattan with bourbon goes, I like how you specified, like there's a Manhattan without bourbon. But it does appear like it's bourbon day around here because I'm also drinking bourbon. I'm drinking bourbon with sweet tea. And sweet tea in my house means about 4 cups of sugar.
I don't like sweet tea. Another reason I am a Yank.
You don't like sweet tea?
No,
okay,
I don't.
Let's get this out of the way real quick because we're going to get into our book here in just a minute. And you guys already know we're reading Blade So Black by L.L.McKinney. But before we get into that, the book takes place partially in Atlanta, Georgia. Now, I never lived in Atlanta specifically, but I grew up pretty much in the South. I was born in Virginia. I lived a good portion of my life in southern Missouri, in the Ozarks, but I've also lived in Alabama, Tennessee, and Arkansas. So I've lived in the South. Liz is from Lee Summit, Missouri, which is in the far, northwestern part of Missouri.
Yeah.
So it is fully ensconced in the northern part of the country.
Yeah. Missouri is kind of split in half, where if you grew up in the northern part of Missouri, you're not Southern. But if you grew up down by the border by Arkansas, you are definitely Southern. Now, my dad was born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So I do have a little bit of hereditary Southern.
I did. I spent a month in Baton Rouge at a summer camp there. That was fun.
Yeah. So I was born in northern Missouri and then moved to Kansas.
So yeah,
very northern.
As far as Southernisms, Southern etiquette goes, that's more my sphere than Liz's, and that's why she's a heretic who doesn't like sweet tea. But anyway,
even with hot tea, I don't put anything in it. No lemon, no milk, no sugar. I don't put anything in my tea.
You just want to live without joy, or
if it's good tea, you don't need to mess it up with crap, kind of like coffee or liquor. If it's good, you don't need to mess it up with other stuff.
If it's good, you can improve it by adding other good stuff. But that's not the point of this episode. We're not here to discuss tea. We're here to discuss L.L.McKinney's young adult fantasy novel, A Blade So Black. It was published in 2018, so it's relatively new.
Yes.
I believe it's the first in a trilogy. The second one is already out. That's called A Dream So Dark, and I have already put it on hold at the library.
Okay, good, because I was getting ready to order it.
I already put it on hold at the library. I love this book, and I think what we want to do here, because there's so much to talk about, is we're going to do our kind of traditional summary thing, but we're going to try and make that quick so we can talk about the book and the themes of the book. Don't you think that's a good way to do it?
Yes. This beautiful woman on the cover is named Alice. And the night her father dies is the night she meets her first nightmare and Addison Hatta.
Yes.
And she finds out about nightmares, which are plaguing humanity, and joins forces with Hatta to become the new fighter of
human protector.
Yes,
basically the concept of this book, and again, we'll get into plot details as we discuss the themes of the book, but the basic plot of the book here is a teenage girl who has just lost her father, becomes a kind of Buffy the Vampire Slayer type chosen one, who has to go between two worlds, because there is another world besides ours called Wonderland, which is built entirely on human subconscious, essentially.
Yes, it is the collective dream subconscious of all of humanity. And
but it has its own citizens and creatures that are all alive, and they are trying to fight against what's called nightmares, which are created by human worries and fears.
Yes,
and
nightmares.
The only ones who can kill nightmares are humans.
Are humans, because humans are the only ones who can overcome their fear. It takes muchness, basically belief in yourself and your existence, to defeat a nightmare.
So this book kind of covers the introduction to that world, the world building and the concept of that, and then goes about midway through the book, goes into an additional plot detail of her trying to rescue Hatta, who is this man that she has met. Now, the main characters that we have here are, of course, Alice. She is 17 years old.
17.
She's the main part of the book. A junior in high school in Atlanta, Georgia. She has just lost her father. He was kind of like a year.
It's like 13 to 15 months. Because this whole book, it's like we lost her father, and then the next major part of the book happens 3 months after that, and then the rest of the book takes place about a year after those 3 months. So it's been about the whole book covers about a year and a half,
about 18 months. Yeah. So the book starts off with a prologue, her losing her dad, and as you see over and over again through the book deals a lot with her grief and the loss of her father, because they were very close. They were actually, I think, from what I understand, they were at a comic book convention of some sort.
Yeah, they were at Comic-Con.
No, probably would have been Dragon Con, because Dragon Con.
Yeah, you're right. It would have been Dragon Con
in Atlanta. So they were at Dragon Con,
where she's dressed as Princess Serenity, which bonus points for Sailor Moon references.
Yeah, she's a big Sailor Moon fan, as is the author of the book, from what I understand.
Cosmic Moon Power, bitches.
And her father dies of a cardiac incident. Now, this was like the first interesting thing, and it came back up again at the end of the book. Mm-hmm. For me, it was really interesting because it suggests that he had this heart attack while they were at Dragon Con, and either EMTs came there to tend to him or he was taken to the hospital, but he still died.
Yeah, but they said there was nothing the doctor said they couldn't catch something, there was nothing they could do, and it was sudden.
That's the thing. The thing that's very interesting about that is she mentions it again towards the end of the book, that the doctors didn't catch it, didn't notice it, didn't realize it, because it sounds like her dad, went to the doctor regularly and got his checkups, and they just not noticed it, which is actually very, very common.
It is, because there is bias in the medical field against
there's
people of color.
There's actually a huge problem. It happens mostly to Black women, but any people of color in the United States experience this. There have been plenty of studies to show that symptoms that might be different, or more importantly, Black people in particular tend to have doctors minimize their pain. So if they say I'm experiencing an 8 on an 8 out of 10 or a 1 out of 10 scale, a doctor might consider that a 4 or a 5.
Yeah, simply because there is this kind of overarching bias, which is not fair.
So right off the bat, it's very subtle, but right off the bat, it's there. You see an immediate discrepancy between our lived experiences as white people and the lived experiences of this teenage protagonist who lost her dad, probably that she didn't have to, because a lot of people have heart problems and even have heart attacks and survive, but that usually depends on their doctors being vigilant about it.
Yeah, exactly. And heart attacks in white men and Black men look relatively similar, but the symptoms are just not taken as seriously. Heart attacks can look vastly different just between a white man and a white woman. So women, just in general, their pain level is minimized when they're at the doctor as well. And especially if you add being a woman of color on top of that, it's just almost impossible to get your doctor to listen to you.
Yeah.
If you're interested in this, John Oliver did a wonderful entire episode about it in the pre-pandemic days. Go look it up. Yeah. It's very informative.
So right off the bat, Alice is dealing with this tragedy. Then she encounters this nightmare, which is described as like this I kind of picture them as like these black viscous kind of animalistic shapes.
Shifty thing. Like I feel like the edges are never solid. They just kind of move and wiggle, and
they're kind of like shadow monsters you might have seen in other movies, or like Nightmare Before Christmas has kind of a creature like that.
Or it's like they have a basic kind of shadow shape and eyes.
Yeah.
And claws.
The one that she first meets is drawn to her because of her grief over her father's death. And she is rescued by, like we said, another main character, Addison Hatta. And Hatta is a denizen of Wonderland. Now, the thing that's cool about this book, obviously...
I love how they take all the characters and twist them. It's so good.
So, I saw this book for the first time marketed as Alice in Wonderland meets Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Mm-hmm.
Which is pretty accurate. And but the way that this works is basically, like, the author, L.L. McKinney, took this this concept of Alice in Wonderland, that portal fiction. We've talked about how much I love portal fiction before.
Mm-hmm.
And she changed the story. Basically, she used the frameworks of the characters that already existed, but changed them to fit into the world that she had presented.
Yeah, like
and a lot more dark and a lot more gritty. But yeah, so Hatta obviously is a
reference to Hatter,
to the Mad Hatter. And it's interesting that right off the bat, there's sort of an attraction between Alice and Hatta. They're very flirtatious with each other. The book is from her point of view, third person, limited. And she has very clearly got a huge crush on him that only gets bigger the longer she knows him and the closer they become. And he seems to be pretty receptive to it, but he never instigates anything. He just flirts with her a lot. And this is interesting because obviously in the original novel and in the animated Disney film, Alice is a 7-year-old. Yeah. And the Hatter is, well, Wonderlandians don't age the same, but the Hatter appears as an old man.
Yeah.
The thing that actually changed all of this was, in fact, Disney. Fun fact, I'm about to get real nerd on your ass.
I love Disney fun facts.
So when Disney decided to bring Alice to Disney World as a face character, they wanted her to be a little bit older so that she could be more, conversational with people. And they also wanted her to have a partner. They a lot of times put characters into the park together to make them more interesting. Now, they had the White Rabbit in a head costume. They had some playing cards, and they were in the parade. But they wanted someone that she could bounce off of, kind of like Hook and Pan bounce off of each other. Mm-hmm. And so they decided on the Hatter. They redesigned him entirely. He's now tall. He's still got the white hair, still got the same costume. He's got, instead of like pointy old man nose, he's got this little round nose with freckles. Yeah. He comes across visually as like his mid-20s. And then several artists, Brianna Garcia being one of the main ones.
I love her. I have read all of her comics.
Started writing comics about the characters, the face characters in Disneyland, as if they were the actual characters from the story.
Yes. And rumor has it she worked for Disney for a bit.
Yeah. So that's where we first started to see Alice Hatter as a ship, like a pairing in fan fiction. And I do not doubt that McKinney knows this because she mentioned several times in this book, she mentions fan fiction, she mentions OTPs, shipping. Like she's
Courtney said, you two have been my OTP for a long time. And I'm like, I am Courtney.
That's one of the most refreshing things about this is that the teenagers in this book are allowed to be teenagers. Yeah. So many authors, even good YA authors, slip into this thing of where they make their teenagers act too mature for their age, or don't let them enjoy things that are not quintessentially teenage, like in the 1950s Grease sense. Like either you're a cheerleader or a football player, or maybe a drama nerd. But there's no kid who's going to sit there and talk about fan fiction and the time they spend on the internet. The first time I can think of seeing that in a YA novel before this would have been in Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. But this character is unapologetically nerdy.
Yeah, I love it when nerds get to write books. It's like my favorite thing when nerds get to write books.
So since L.L. McKinney, pardon us, don't take offense to the name, but we think you're kind of a nerd.
And we love you very much.
Yes, we do. Please listen to our podcast.
Please follow us on Twitter.
Since she's a nerd, she also wrote Alice as a nerd. So Alice is at a comic book convention with her father when he has his heart attack.
Her dad is the one who got her into anime
and comics. Her favorite
cosplay.
character is Sailor Moon, or Princess Serenity from Sailor Moon. She repeats this over and over again. Another interesting diversion from our experiences at con. Now, as a woman or a female-bodied person at con, you are probably going to get harassed no matter what, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
It goes just like everything else. Like we talked earlier, like doctors minimize the pain of women and non-male patients, but it goes double for Black people. Same thing here. She mentions, like in the first chapter, she mentions a derogatory term that people use for Black people who act white, which is an Oreo.
Yeah.
It's an incredibly offensive way to treat someone, and to like assume that any one culture belongs to a race over another race, or any like, fandom culture belongs to like white people. And it's this like very virulent, aggressive racism that you see, unfortunately, in nerd circles. Yeah. So to be a Black nerd, maybe Black nerds are less common. It's not because Black people aren't nerds. It's because they're not welcome in nerd spaces.
Yeah, and there's also not a lot of, main people of color for them to cosplay as. So what are their options,
Well, yeah, and there's nothing that says that a character has to be cosplayed in the race that character is. I've known plenty of, white people who have cosplayed characters of color, and that's fine as long as you don't do blackface or brownface, or play a character that's race is significant to the character. But it should go the other way. And, Alice mentions that she loves to cosplay as Princess Serenity, who, interestingly, looks white on screen, but is actually Japanese.
Yeah. So then, you and I couldn't actually do that if we were only allowed to cosplay.
Yeah, if you're only allowed to cosplay as your own race, we shouldn't be cosplaying Princess Serenity.
Then we shouldn't cosplay Princess Serenity.
But she's the one who gets harassed for it at conventions. So
which is not fair.
It's a really unique way to do a couple of things. The first thing, which I think is probably the most important to the author, is to be relatable to Black YA readers, because there aren't that many representatives out there for Black kids who want to read a YA novel where they get to be the protagonist. They're usually the friend or the side character or the sassy old lady who gives advice. But in this case, she is the protagonist, unapologetically shows she is unapologetically Black. So obviously her first point here, I believe, is to give that representation, but also for a white reader, it kind of opens your eyes up to that and makes you confront the fact that she lives a very different experience than you. And then the third thing it does is tells us right off the bat that Alice Kingston has thick skin. She does. She's very tough
girl.
And after going through the death of her dad, she starts working with Hatta to fight these monsters. For her, it's kind of an outlet for her grief. Like, she can turn her grief into rage and aggression and kind of get rid of these monsters.
Yeah.
Which is very, very healing for her in a certain way, although she still does live with that grief. But things kind of start to turn sideways when something that is not very fantasy novel happens in this fantasy novel that is unfortunately very realistic that happens in life. Is a young girl named Brianna is gunned down by the police at a high school football game.
They said she was wearing gang colors, but she was actually wearing the colors of her football team, trying to get a ride home. And nothing has happened. This girl is just dead for doing absolutely nothing.
Yes. Unfortunately, this is all too common an issue. We've seen it hundreds of times played out over and over again.
Which, by the way, today is also an excellent day to arrest the people who are responsible for the murder of Brianna Taylor. Just saying.
Yeah.
Good day for that.
Well, I kind of thought about that. I wondered what I'm sure McKinney had plenty of thoughts and grief when she heard about Brianna Taylor. But the fact that she named her character Brianna, and
before this even happened,
like it's 2 years later, you see it, like I'm sure that, because that was the first thing I saw as soon as I read the name, I thought of Brianna Taylor.
That's exactly what I thought of.
And so
to show you in 2 years, nothing has changed.
No. And so this girl dies, Brianna dies, and of course this sends shockwaves through Atlanta, but it particularly affects Alice and her relationship with her mother, because her mother, who is already worried about her, considering that she is now a single mom trying to take care of a teenager, and then her teenager has started disappearing for long periods of time and not responding to text messages.
And
this is one of the first portal fiction fantasy novels that I've ever read that like actively and regularly dealt with the fact that protagonists just disappear off the face of the earth for hours at a time. Because like most of the time they're like, oh yeah, and then I fucked off to fucking
Alice's
Wonderland.
mother understands that she's growing up to be a woman, she's going to be an adult, and she's like, I know I can't always keep tabs on you, I just don't want you to ignore my texts, because that was somebody's baby who was shot, and that could very clearly also be you, even if you do nothing wrong.
Right. And it's very interesting to see that play out between them and see that conversation play out, because it doesn't feel like
it's a very real conversation.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a conversation McKinney wrote for the book. It feels like a conversation McKinney had with her own mother,
probably,
and then just basically translated it to the book. But yeah, this book actually deals with the fact that if you're a hero, if you're a teenage hero, people are going to wonder where you went. Like a lot of times that gets kind of brushed over. Like I think about things like Spider-Man. Like there's like the second Spider-Man movie does it a little bit where people complain that Peter's not showing up for things, but at that point he's an adult and no one's like, where have you been? We're worried sick about you. This book like delves into the real world consequences of her disappearing without a word for days on end, which I thought was interesting because it really does add another element of difficulty to her job as
a teenage superhero.
Yeah.
But because so those are like the consequences of this killing in the real world, and it has consequences in Wonderland as well, because of all the unrest and the fear and the tension and the bad dreams going around Atlanta now. They have an influx of nightmares that they need to deal with.
Like Liz said, the unrest in the Black community in Atlanta, all of their dreams are kind of building up into this uber nightmare. And Alice ends up going, we don't actually even get to see this fight. Like we only get to experience the aftermath of this fight, which tells us how bad it was, is that Alice ends up going to a small village in Wonderland called Ahoon, where she fights the nightmare that has been created by Brianna's death. And that nightmare is the worst one she's ever had to face, partially because it's so big and so powerful, and partially because that fear is a very, very personal fear that she has herself.
And it almost kills her.
And it almost kills her. The only reason it doesn't is because she has the help of the Northern guards. It seems that there are 4 different human guards.
Yeah.
There's one in Tokyo. Yeah, Dreamwalkers. Characters like Alice who are heroes who come into the world. So it seems like there are 4 sections that cover all of Wonderland. So there's
D and Dem.
D and Dem, the Tweedledums, which they're Russian boys. They're the Northern Guard, and they are with her in Ahoon, and they're able to help her in order to defeat the nightmare. Then there is also a character in Tokyo and a character, I think, in South Africa.
South Africa.
So that's the southern one. Tokyo's the eastern one. So that makes Alice Kingston the western Dreamwalker.
Yeah.
And so there's 5 human teenagers, essentially, whose job is to protect Wonderland and to protect the human world from the nightmares that come out of Wonderland, because nightmares become more powerful when they cross the veil into the human world.
And each one of them has a handler, like Hatta is to Alice. And the D and Dem, their handler is known as the Duchess.
And then this is where we see some more direct comparisons. So D and Dem are obviously Tweedledee and Tweedledum.
Yes.
Who in the book are characters who mostly annoy Alice and harass her. These guys do that, but it's a much more friendly kind of banter. They just kind of tease her. It's almost like they consider her to be a little sister.
Yeah, I was going to say, it feels very brotherly.
Although she does comment on the fact that they are very, very hot Russian boys. Yeah.
That is also something else I like in this book.
She notices every time that someone is hot. I can admire that about a girl, you know?
I can too. Because I'm just kind of like, there is in interviews that L.L. McKinney has done, she has said that Alice is canonically bi.
Well, yeah, you can see that, and we'll get to that when we get to that. But so D and Dem are based off Tweedledee and Tweedledum, and the Duchess is based off of the Duchess. Most people who most people who know Alice in Wonderland either know the animated movie or the first novel, but there are 2 novels. The first is Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and the second is Through the Looking Glass. And in Through the Looking Glass, there's a character called the Duchess, who is a royal that is not one of the queens, who was banished from Wonderland by the queens. In that book, it's kind of implied that she attempted to stage a coup. And she has a baby that looks like a pig. I remember that. She's always carrying around a pig swaddled like a baby, and it's just screaming. It's a very, very weird image in Through the Looking Glass. But also in Through the Looking Glass, the Mad Hatter is exiled, though we don't really get the details of why. And
no, but in this book, Hatter is exiled.
In fact, it seems that the Wonderland handlers of the Dreamwalkers are all exiles, because the Duchess is exiled as well.
Yes. And Alice knows there was a war in Wonderland where the Red Queen and the White Queen defeated the Black Queen.
She doesn't know much beyond that, but she does know the people who had worked with the Black Queen and eventually left her service to help the Red and the White Queen were exiled. They were not killed, but they were exiled for their part in the
Which
Black
they thought was a kinder punishment.
Yes. But Alice doesn't agree, again, because she's gotten very attached to Hatta. Yeah. She feels like he was unfairly punished. And this is the first kind of foreshadowing that she doesn't really understand everything that's going on.
No.
Because Hatta clearly doesn't want to talk about it. And she's like, I feel like if you...
He also seems perfectly happy with his exile.
Yeah. She keeps bringing it up. She's like, if all you did was work for the Black Queen, who was your queen to begin with, and then when you realized she was doing wrong, you switched sides, I don't understand why that's bad enough to be exiled. And he's like, don't fucking worry about it. And right away I was like, okay, so he did something bad.
You should worry about it. And
he did something bad.
So there is an intermittent scene where we do meet Alice's two friends in the human world. One is her best friend, Courtney, who she calls Court, who is kind of her comrade in arms who covers for her when she disappears for hours on end.
Court is the only other human who knows what Alice's real job is.
And Chester, who is a new addition to their duo, who goes by the name of Chess, with purple eyes, I would like to point out.
Right. McKinney did such a good job of pulling a fast one on us with that, because as soon as Chess was introduced, I was waiting for some big reveal that he was secretly from Wonderland the whole time, and that he was the Cheshire Cat.
But he is the Cheshire Cat. I'm not convinced.
Well, he is now. I think what happened is the things at the end of the book has turned him into it. But I think before that, he was a normal human boy. But I spent so much of the book.
He's not a normal human boy. Do you know any other normal human boys who can answer teenage girls' thoughts?
I forgot about that. He only does that once, and we don't know for sure that she didn't say it out loud.
I'm not convinced.
Well, we'll have to read the second book, won't we? Anyway, so yeah, Court and Chess are her two friends in the human world in her high school. And Chess, much like Hatta, seems to kind of have a crush on Alice, very flirty with Alice, and Alice isn't.
But
she seems flattered by this, but to me, she seems flattered by it, but she seems more interested in Hatta.
And I know that at this point in the book, because of what happened in Ahoon and with what happened with Brianna and the conversation that Alice had with her mother, she's considering retiring from being a Dreamwalker. And she tells Court this, and Court is like, no.
Yeah, she plans to retire. She goes to the pub that Hatta and Maddie, which is the Dormouse, run as a front for their portal into Wonderland.
Which they call the Looking Glass.
Yeah, another nice nod there. Another nod I enjoyed was that Alice and her mom have two cats named Lewis and Carol.
I did notice that. I thought that made me think of Gregory Maguire naming the Wicked Witch of the West Elphaba for L. Frank Baum. Yeah. I also remember there's a part where Hatta quoted, there are more things in heaven than earth, Horatio. And I was walking through the kitchen as I was listening to that because I was cleaning because the girls were asleep. And I remember hearing that, just punching the air, being like, Shakespeare. Shakespeare. Yep. Well, yeah. There's a lot of really good references. McKinney is clearly very, very familiar with the source material, but she's made it her own in such a unique and interesting way. So good. I really, really got
really got invested in this one. I've been having
Me
so
too.
much trouble reading actual books in quarantine. Speaking of being nerds, and I feel like
I've been reading so much fan fiction.
Fan fiction is easier because I already know the characters, I already know the circumstances.
And also,
so
too,
I don't
normally
have
they're
to decide how I
one-shot,
feel.
so you can read it in 20 minutes.
Oh, honey, I don't read one-shots. I read hundreds of word multi-chapter fics. Are you kidding me? No, but what I do read is fanfic because it's so much easier. I already have an investment in the characters. I know how I feel about them. Whereas when you read a new novel,
happy ending.
Yeah, you know what's coming. Whereas when you read a new novel, you don't know how it's going to end. You don't know how you're going to feel about the characters when it starts. It's just a lot more of an investment. And I've struggled a lot in quarantine with it because I kind of have stupid COVID quarantine brain. And just my attention span is worse than even usual for someone with ADHD. But this book,
ADHD, but my attention's been shit too. So
this book, I was absolutely riveted. This morning I was doing remote work, and I would have like a 20-minute session with a medical student, and then I would get a 10-minute break, and then I'd have another one. And I was just sitting here. As soon as the session was over, I would read as much as I could until the next.
Yeah. I literally read this book, let's see, nap time, second nap time, after they went to bed. I read this book in 5 hours.
Yeah, I read my Kindle told me I read it in 3.5 hours.
Yeah,
it was spread over a couple of days, but like I read it in 3.5 hours. Like if I had been able to sit down with it, like if I hadn't been so busy, I would have read it in one night. It's very, very fast paced, and like it took me a minute at the beginning because we've talked about before my opinions on first person point of view and the sort of informality of it is what bothers me. And this book has the same informality, but in third person. Like a lot of times there will be interjections that are clearly like Alice's thoughts, and the language of the book is very much tempered by the fact that Alice is a Southern Black girl who grew up in Georgia.
Yeah.
And so there's different spellings, or there are words that I don't know or don't use.
Yeah.
From like AAVE. At first, that kind of threw me off. But as the book progressed, I really appreciated it because it kind of, I feel like, kept me anchored to the character, even though I was in third person. And once I got through that, I was just absolutely riveted. The only part I struggle with, and I struggle with this in any book that has action scenes, is the action scenes. Because a lot of times I have a hard time figuring out what's happening.
Well,
like,
and action's
there's too many things happening
to write.
Yeah.
Like, I'm writing, like, that book that you read last April. I'm writing, like, the final battle scene with it, and I'm having my husband help me with it because he has the battle strategy mind, and I'm like, how does any of this work? And how do I take it down to one person's point of view?
Right. And I think that the battle scenes in this book were written well, but
they're so good.
That's just hard for me to read and visualize, especially in a situation where there are magical things that you don't necessarily understand happening.
Yeah.
But
part of that is because Alice, to some degree, doesn't understand some of what's happening, especially as we get closer to the end of the book. She's like, there's just this light and stuff happens.
Right. Because what happens next is that Alice goes to the pub to tell Hatta that she's retiring, and he says, well, he tells her she didn't cleanse a hoon.
Yeah, and she's like, oh my gosh, this is my fault, because after you defeat a nightmare, the Figment Blade, which is the only thing which is the weapons they use, you have to cleanse the ground with the Figment Blade that killed it. And she did not do that because she was so injured.
And she was afraid.
She was.
And so she left without cleansing the ground, and he said, you need to go back in and cleanse it so that another nightmare can't crop up in the same place. Yeah. He can't go with her because it's beyond the bounds of his exile.
Yeah.
And so she's nervous about this. He tells her that there will be backup for her there, and that he will be waiting for her at the portal when she comes.
And she's like, if I'm going to quit, I need to clean up my mess.
Yeah, the thing about Alice is, and I don't think she's entirely fair to herself.
No, she's not.
She's very quick
for a lot.
She's very quick to take responsibility for things, which is a good quality in general, but she won't ever. There are things that
are not her fault that she blames herself for.
Yeah, exactly. And so in this case, I feel like, yes, it is her fault, but it's understandable that it happened. I admire that she's willing to go back and fix this.
Yeah.
She goes back. She finds the Tweedledums are there to back her up. They find a weird puddle of black goo. It's not exactly
Where
like
something's not going correctly, and she's like, they cleanse the ground, and she's like, okay, fine. And she's like, okay, that's it, I'm done. And she tells the Tweedledums that she's retiring, gives them her email address so they can keep in touch, and starts heading back to the gate and runs into someone named the Black Knight who has a Vorpal blade, and he basically beats the shit out of her.
that was one of my favorite scenes. It was very scary.
So
he
scary.
quotes the Jabberwocky.
He does.
Lewis Carroll's poem, The Jabberwocky, which is used in the Alice in Wonderland books. He quotes it while he's like
Beating
just kicking her ass.
Yeah.
And he like slices her hand open.
Yeah.
And gives her a message to give to Hatta about something about an eye.
Yeah, he wants the eye.
And she has no idea what any of this means.
And she doesn't know how she gets back, but she does.
She basically wakes up being tended to by Maddie in the back of the pub.
Yeah, and they're like, no idea what happened? And she's like, I ran into this asshole named the Black Knight, and Hatta just like loses his shit. He's like, that's impossible. He can't have a Vorpal blade. He can't have any of this.
The Black Knight is dead. The Black Knight
is dead. He's gone. He's not coming back. There is no way this is the Black Knight. And she's like, I'm not saying it's the real one. I'm saying some guy is acting like him.
Did you figure it out then?
Yes.
Yeah, I kind of suspected.
Okay, I will tell you. I think it was I made note of the page number that I.
You got different page numbers than me.
Yeah. Page 230. There is a thing with the Black Knight. I think it's like their second meeting. But that was the page that I'm like, yeah. For the second thing. Which we'll talk about later. But yeah, that was the moment that I'm like, yeah, it's Hatta. I wasn't surprised later. I'm like, it's Hatta. That's how he knows with such certainty that it's not the Black Knight, because it was him.
Yeah, but we don't find that out right away.
No, we don't.
We basically, she finds out, she gives Hatta the message, which the weird cut on her hand basically transfers to his hand. And she gives him the message.
It was a dark verse, which is in Wonderland, words.
Verses are what they call potions.
Yeah. So it's a curse, basically.
Yeah, so she transfers this to him kind of unknowingly. And they tell her that she tells him about the eye. He's like, I don't have it.
No. He's like, the eye is gone.
And then she's going to go about her business. But he starts having a fit. Yeah. And they realize that she has inadvertently carried a poisonous curse from the Black Knight to Hatta.
Caused by a Vorpal blade. Which so is what they called the madness. It was something that the Black Knight was able to cause to his enemies on behalf of the Black Queen.
Yeah. So Alice, all of her plans of retiring kind of go out the window after that.
Because she's like, this is my fault. I have to fix it.
And she cares about him. And she wants to help him. And so she...
And through all this, she also has missed her best friend's birthday party.
Yes, she and Courtney have a huge falling out. Courtney doesn't realize that she almost died, and that's why she doesn't show up to the birthday party. And they have a bit of a falling out. Alice is also not on good terms with her mother at the time.
Because she has been missing for like 2 days.
Yeah, she's been gone for over 24 hours, and her mother is furious. And
if I was a mom, I would be.
So she goes home, gets grounded, and sneaks out to go back into Wonderland. Because Maddie, who is Hatta's companion, who works in the pub with him, and is again, I think we said, like the doormat.
That can give her times of lucidity where she can speak.
She's not very lucid in general.
No, she's not.
She's known to just kind of put her head down on the bar and go to sleep.
Because the more powerful a poet or potion maker is, the less they make sense. And Maddie must be damn powerful.
Yeah.
So she does have potions she can take that give her moments of lucidity. And so Maddie finally tells Alice the story of the war, where the Queen of Hearts ruled Wonderland with her 2 daughters, the White Queen and the Red Queen, and she had a 3rd daughter. And then the first human came to Wonderland and befriended the youngest princess.
Now that sounded like the original Alice.
Yeah, that did sound like the original.
They describe a little 7-year-old blonde girl in a little blue dress with a pinafore.
Yeah.
So it's basically a callback to original Alice.
It's a callback to the original Alice. And she befriended the youngest princess, and then one day the princess disappeared.
They both disappear. Alice and the youngest princess vanish in the Glow, which is one of the woods areas of Wonderland.
Yeah, and the Queen of Hearts was so stricken with grief that she started using the dark forces of Wonderland, known as the Nox, to try and bring back her youngest child. And through that, she was corrupted and became the Black Queen. And her 2 daughters knew they had to stop her. And at the end of the war, they did, and they became the Queens Red and White.
And they split the kingdom between the 2 of them. But then shortly after that, the Red Queen disappeared. And so the White Queen was the only ruler in Wonderland at that point. It's a very interesting.
One of them took the eye of the Black Queen, and the other one took the heart of the Black Queen, which is the only thing that can reverse the madness.
So Maddie's idea is that Alice
travel to the White Castle.
Should go to the White Castle and ask the Queen to bring the heart and use it to heal Hatta.
The White Queen to bring the heart to use Hatta.
Unfortunately, when they get there, they find out that the White Queen has also been poisoned by the same curse.
Yes, and
her little daughter, Princess Odabeth, is now essentially in charge. Also,
I think it's Zelon?
Zelon, yeah. Zelon. This is also when they find out, the White Knight, Zelon, who is Princess Odabeth's knight.
Personal guard.
They inform Alice that not only is the White Queen indisposed, the Red Queen is missing, and the Red Queen is the only one who knows where the heart is, because they each took one and hid them separate from each other so they couldn't be recovered. Yeah. Alice quickly figures out that the White Queen hid the heart by sending it with Hatta. Or hid the eye.
By sending it with Hatta. If you want something that can't be hidden in the realm of Wonderland, there's only one place to put it.
On Earth.
Yeah, so she sent it with Hatta. And they also discover that the White Queen also has been cursed with the madness by the Black Knight.
So Odabeth is very eager to... They figure if they find the eye... If they find the eye, they can use the eye to find the heart.
Yes.
And Odabeth wants to save her mother. There's a certain...
because these artifacts can only be used by those of royal blood.
And Alice and Odabeth develop a sort of camaraderie understanding because of Alice has suffered the loss of her father, and Odabeth is in the process of losing her mother. So they make their way back to the portal in Atlanta. On the way, they're attacked by the Black Knight and some of his nightmares.
Yes, which have been mutated into something called fiends, where they're nightmares, but they're stronger and they're smarter.
Well, more specifically, they're nightmares that were made, instead of made from nothing, they were corrupted Wonderlandians. Yeah,
so there's no way to save a fiend, unfortunately, that we know of, unless you use the heart.
So Alice, they basically make a mad dash. It's a very tense section in the book. They make a mad dash. And Zelon almost dies.
If you are bitten by a fiend, you become a fiend.
So Zelon almost dies, but they are able to get her back to Maddie in time to take care of her. They find out that Hatta is improved somewhat, but not much.
No.
And he does not want
them finding the eye because the risk to Wonderland is too great. He's like, it's fine, just let me die. And Alice is like, no.
Specifically, the entire thing has been orchestrated by this Black Knight in order to get everything. He figures if he poisons Hatta and he poisons the Queen, Alice and Odabeth are going to have huge motivation to
get the eye and bring it to him. So he's basically letting Alice and company do his dirty work for him.
Yes.
So then when this happens, when they get back, Courtney also shows up at the pub. She's been super upset. She's like, I got your message. Why didn't you tell me you almost died? It's a stupid birthday. Oh my God, I can't lose my best friend. And Chess is there with him, and he's just kind of like, I did not read your text. It popped up on the home screen. So basically now they let Chess in on what's going on. Yeah.
They also use Odabeth's ability to call on the eye to find it, and they discover that Hatta has split it into 6 pieces and hidden it in mirrors.
So Alice has one. Each of the twins has one. The Duchess has one. Hatta has one.
Maddie has one.
Yeah, Maddie has one. And so the 6th one is in Alice's locker at school.
And so Chess and Courtney help her to break into the school.
Which is another thing at this point where Alice says, she's like, we're going to keep my black ass out of jail. And Courtney is just kind of like, we're not going to go to jail. She's like, you're white. You'll be fine. My ass will go to jail.
Yeah. So they go to the school. They go to the school, break into the school to successfully get the mirror, and then they're attacked by the Black Knight.
By the Black Knight.
Fiends. And the Black Knight...
The Black Knight takes Chester hostage. I am convinced the Black Knight is still Chess. Convinced.
You think?
I still think it's him, yeah. Because he had purple eyes before he was ever in Wonderland. That we know of. 2, there are 2 very specific scenes where it's like page 230 in the book. The Black Knight answers one of Alice's thoughts. And the only other person we've seen in the book do that previously is Chess. So I think Chess is the new Black Knight. Whether consciously or not, I still think it's him.
At any rate, Chess gets taken hostage. He gets stabbed with the Vorpal blade.
Yeah.
Which will turn him into a fiend in a few hours. And the knight says, I'll reverse the process if you bring me the eye at dawn. And so they decide...
He's like, I'll find you, wherever you are.
They decide to pretend to give him the eye, specifically so that they can then attack him and take Chess back.
Yeah.
It does not go to plan.
No, because they end up at the football field where Brianna was killed.
Yes.
Is where the kind of final confrontation is.
So Alice, Hatta, and Zelon go to the football field. Yeah. The rest of them stay at the pub.
Which also, too, by the way, lesbian princess.
Yeah. Odabeth, before they leave, Odabeth kisses Zelon. Is very good.
It's adorable. I love it. It made me
so
also happy.
I'm also kind of a sucker for the like bodyguard-esque.
Yeah, the bodyguard and the royalty. Oh yeah, like that's a trope I adore. I like that trope almost as much as the princess and the scoundrel.
Mm-hmm. I just think of like the Whitney Houston movie. Yeah. So they go to the football field to confront the Black Knight. Chess does not appear to make it. He appears to die in the process. The Black Knight flees.
Which this is also another thing. They have not said that humans can become fiends. Well, yeah. So that means Chess would have had to have been somebody from Wonderland in order to become a fiend.
They said they didn't know what would happen if a human was stabbed with a Vorpal blade. They didn't say they couldn't become fiends. They said they didn't know what would happen. And when they see him again, his skin is all...
still convinced that Chess is the Black Knight.
Well, okay, but we're actually talking about...
I know.
This book, not any future speculation.
I know.
So they find Chess. He's all fucked up. He's been stabbed.
Yeah, it's bad.
Appears to die. Turns into the same fiend that she fought in at Hoon. She fights it again, defeats it, and apparently kills Chess in the process.
Yeah.
Blacks out, wakes back up at the pub, and Hatta tells her that Chess is dead. They brought his body back.
And she's devastated.
Yeah, it's the second major loss that she's had in like the space of 2 years.
Yeah.
And so she has a meltdown about it, and then she and Court leave, although she doesn't seem to know if Court's taking her home or if they're going somewhere else.
Yeah, because she's like, my mother is going to kill me.
They basically are like, we need to regroup. And like the interesting thing about this is like Hatta seems to be doing okay by the end of the book, but he's still poisoned.
Yeah,
like,
he's still poisoned. The White Queen is still poisoned.
He still had several episodes of like madness where he's like attacked people like Maddie or gone like catatonic. So there's no telling how long they've got him with them as like a resource. So they're just like, we're going to regroup. And so I think probably the next book picks up exactly where this one left off.
Like, probably. And then we have an epilogue, which is apparently from Chess's point of view.
It does seem like it is from Chess's point of view. And it's him dying and hearing a voice calling him back from beyond the grave. And then he wakes up.
And it's like, you poor dear, look at what she did to you.
Yeah, like it basically uses the fact that
it kind of implies that the Black Queen is not defeated.
Yeah, that's definitely the implication I got. Yeah. Is the Black Queen has
and that Maddie is now being choked to death by the Cheshire Cat.
Yeah, so Chess like attacks Maddie, and that's literally the end of the book. It's like kind of a jump
cliffhanger for sure.
Movie cliffhanger.
Post credits Marvel editions.
Yeah, so that's where it leaves off. It's very much a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
The next book. Yeah, so in addition to that, I think it was just a very interesting book. I was really, like I said, captivated.
It was.
I liked the characters a lot. I
liked how the nods to the original Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah, the original material.
Like, this is such a good new take on the original material. And again, yeah, it does blend it with Buffy a lot. Like, Courtney is like Willow. I kept getting like Willow and Xander vibes from like Chess and Courtney, which I am Courtney. I'm like, I will support you, I will cover for you, and I will bring you drinks when you're done.
I liked the Duchess. I would have liked to see more character development. And there was like kind of an implication that maybe the Duchess and Hatta had a past
had a thing.
And at some point in the middle of all the chaos, Alice and Hatta did have like a little makeout session in the middle of everything.
And then she's like, oh my god, I feel so guilty. This asshole has Chess, and I'm sitting here making goo-goo eyes at Hatta. I should be focusing.
You know, it happens. It happens.
Yeah, I mean, you're 17.
Listen, I'm not straight, but like, Hatta seems like a pretty cool dude, is all.
Yeah. I would have a hard time resisting Hatta.
So then,
and I am straight.
So then, talking about speculations, Liz clearly thinks that Chess.
I am fully convinced that Chess is the Black Knight. Clearly, it's just because of the purple eyes from page 1 of his introduction, and that he hasn't been in their friend group very long. He just now kind of showed up, and then he also knows where Alice lives after he took her home. And he's the only character that we know of that answered Alice's thoughts besides the Black Knight.
I don't know. Like, I could see it going that way, but I also, like, I really like if it wasn't the case. Because, again, from the first introduction of the character, I was like, okay, at some point, this guy is going to either reveal that he's from Wonderland and he's a friend, or he's going to betray her.
Something else is the Black Knight always calls Alice Princess.
He calls her Kitten.
And he's also called her Princess.
Well, I think we both can agree that we think that Alice is probably the third lost princess.
Yeah, some lost.
Because like, that especially that whole emphasis on how the heart and eye can only be used by royalty. Like, you just know
Alice was the one who got the eye out of the mirror.
That
wasn't the White Princess. It was
But
Alice.
She didn't use it.
No.
So but I could imagine them taking Odebeth out of the equation at some point, and Alice. And it's like they don't have a way to use it, and then Alice realizes the truth, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
It could go that way. It could go entirely different. This book already subverts a lot of expectations.
Yeah.
So there's no reason to think it won't keep doing that. And that's kind of how I felt about Chess. I was like, my initial thought was that something along those lines. And then whenever they like had him captured and like used as a hostage, I was like, it would actually be very interesting if Chess was not from Wonderland, but what happens here turns him into some kind of cat monster.
That would be very interesting too, and I would love to see that route taken as well. But right now, my belief is that he is a Wonderlandian.
Yeah, we'll find out. Because
Yeah,
again,
we'll find
Blade
out.
So Black is the first book in the Nightmareverse series. I think
Yes.
there are going to be either 3 or 4.
3.
The second one is A Dream So Dark.
L.L.McKinney is at L on Words on Twitter, and I follow her. And I think the third one is about to come out as well. So
A Dream So Dark came out last year.
Last year.
So yeah, the third one should be coming out soon. Yeah, you can follow L.L. McKinney on Twitter as well. She also has a website. It's a really, really fun series. We really enjoyed the first book in it, and we'll definitely be revisiting it.
Oh yes, it's so I definitely want to read the rest of the series now because it was just I want to know.
Yeah,
and it's not like when we read The Beautiful where we felt like I personally felt like I was tricked in having to read the next book if I wanted answers.
I will not.
No, I won't either. I absolutely will not. I will Wikipedia it.
I don't keep reading books if I don't like them. I really like.
Yeah, no. This book was so good though, and I do not mind reading the next 2. I actually look forward to reading the next 2.
Yeah, I really liked it. I thought it was a great take on a classic piece of literature that I already love on portal fiction as a genre in general. And it was a very refreshing change of pace, like we talked about in the Tolkien episode. Not having some old white guy writing your fantasy and not having some old white guy as the main character of your fantasy.
It's so nice to get. I mean, I know I'm speaking from like a place of privilege because I am a straight white woman, but it was so nice to have some kind of other representation and have a different perspective I could look in on, because I have never been a black bi woman from Georgia, but it was kind of nice to get that perspective. Get me out of my own head a little bit.
Well, and that's the thing is like that's the whole conversation we keep trying to have is people are like, well, I don't see why we can't just keep having the straight white dude protagonist that we've always had. And it's like, okay, but everybody who's not a straight white dude has had to relate to this character for so long.
Exactly. And the stakes are so different.
Right.
Like if Buffy got caught breaking into somewhere, the police would probably take her home and have her mother scold her. If Alice got caught breaking into somewhere, her ass would be in jail.
Or she'd get shot.
Yeah, or she'd get shot.
Yeah. So it's very well written. The differences between this book and how it could have been if it was written with a white protagonist are very clear. Yeah. But they're subtle enough that they don't overshadow the fantasy story that's happening at the same time. You still get a really good and interesting commentary without overshadowing the story, which I think is what all great literature should do, is give you a commentary on something while still telling you an entertaining story.
Yeah.
And I think this book succeeds at that.
I think
very well.
Personally, in the next 2 books, we're going to see something with Granny Kingston.
With who?
Granny Kingston.
Or Granny. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Granny. I think something's going to come up with that because she says her dad's mother has like slowly devolved into Alzheimer's and lost her mind. I'm like, I wonder if she's originally from Wonderland.
It will be interesting to find out how the books go from here. We definitely plan to read more. How many bottles would you give A Blade So Black?
I would probably give it 3.5. I mean, it was really good. The story is amazing. I loved Alice as a main character. She was a very real main character. And even I love Buffy. Raised on Buffy. I do have some quarrels with how Buffy was written.
That's because Joss Whedon sucks ass. Joss Whedon listens to our podcast, I guess. I don't really care if you do, but if you do, maybe we'll get more people.
Nathan Fillion listened to our podcast. Broncos forever.
I think I would give the book probably 3.75 bottles.
Yeah,
it was an average of 3 2/3 bottles.
Yeah, I mean, the plot's all thought out. The characters all are multi-dimensional. Even the side best friend characters all have their own stuff going on, which I really enjoyed. I also really enjoyed Alice being a wonderful, strong bi Black woman. Again, because it's a perspective we don't normally often see. And I really, really like the thing that sold me on this book was I originally, like you, saw it marketed as if Buffy fell down the rabbit hole instead of Alice, and I just love how L.L.McKinney treated Wonderland.
Mm-hmm.
I love how she twisted it for her own purposes. I loved the war that they talked about, how she used that. I loved how she was able to like make a lot of nods to the original literature while still kind of keeping in the spirit of it. I love that Wonderland is like the cumulative dreamscape of everybody in the world.
Yeah, that's a really interesting conceit. I like that a lot.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Everything about it, I'm just like, this is awesome. Her concept of Wonderland was so full and round and beautiful.
Well, you can always tell when somebody is writing fantasy, because that's what's profitable compared to writing fantasy, because they have a deep love for fantasy.
Yeah, she has a deep love for fantasy.
Through. Yeah. So whether that makes
I loved the Sailor Moon references that Alice said cosmic moon power every time she cleansed something. I'm like, this is awesome. I love it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a very high action romantic portal fiction, and it's got some really good commentaries on grief and race in it as well. It's
pretty much the total package. Teenagers to be teenagers.
It's pretty much the total package as far as a YA novel goes.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Opinion. I love it.
So yeah, definitely check it out if you are interested in that kind of thing. If you're not, why did you sit here and listen to us for an hour? I don't know.
I know.
But thank you so much for listening. Remember, we do also have a Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and our website, litliteraturePodcast.com.
Yes, and if you're feeling exceptionally generous, we do have a Patreon. If you enjoyed that one kind of special episode we did when we had to take a little mental leave, that was all the blooper reels. If for the lowest tier, you guys will get all of the blooper reels going back to pre-pandemic months, when Casey and I actually were able to do this in a room together.
Wow.
But we also... I know, right? But we also understand that times are tough. A lot of things are uncertain right now. So if you can't donate, that's fine. If you could just tell maybe 3 people to listen to us, we would appreciate that too.
Yes. And thank you so much for listening. Right now, we don't know yet what our next episode will be, but that information will be available on our Twitter as soon as we have decided it. That episode will come out on the 30th. But in the meantime, thanks so much for watching and or listening, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. For more information, visit us at litliteraturePodcast.com or check out our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages. And remember, too much work and no vacation deserves at least a small libation. Cheers!